Well, welcome everybody. We can wait another, it's 11:43. We can talk a little bit about what we're about to do, which I think you're going to enjoy as other people sneak in. Most of you know me. I'm Hank Roubicek. I've been a long time member of TSA. Can all of you hear me? We're good with the volume? Great. Longtime member of TSA. I'm also the former president of the Houston Storytellers Guild. I've been on the radio for many, many years. Some of you know the show. It's So What's Your Story on KPFT here in Houston. And now I have a podcast that's called The Story Voice. I'm a retired communication professor. I've taught for 45 years. I know you're thinking that, well, you don't look more than 45. How can you possibly be retired? I know what you're thinking, yeah. But, yeah, I'm an old man. So, I love doing these workshops for a lot of reasons because it really forces me to focus on things that I think are really relevant and in many ways, practical. And that is the essence of today's workshop. The workshop is called Your Story Spark, which doesn't sound very profound. It's where do we get our story ideas, right? And that makes good sense. But when we talk a little bit more about what this means, it really means that a practical story by its very nature has to be short and meaningful. Now this is, there's a little bit of an echo here. Can you hear an echo? Emily, I don't know if that's on your end or mine. Yeah, no, but we're okay over there, then that's fine. A short story is the most practical kind of story. Now, I say this on the heels of DC's story, which was an hour long. Fabulous story. And I want to make this very clear because this is sometimes a debate. Long stories are better because you can develop them, amplify them. I believe that long stories are great, and I don't want anybody to mishear this. But the purpose of this workshop is to talk about practical stories. Practical stories are short stories. They're also more difficult. That's why Ben Franklin always said, if I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter. The notion is, how do you get people's attention immediately? Now, the research varies quite a bit, but communication researchers show that, yes, a child's attention span is 12 seconds, but an adult's is 27 seconds. We're not a whole lot better. We want to get enthused, engaged immediately, right? Tweed, you know that. You said you were working radio at one time. You've got to get people's attention. You have to use words that work. You have to make sure that it is image driven. You have to make sure that what you choose works at that time. No vocal segregates like, you know. You've got to make sure that you're articulate, clear, concise, because your audience isn't with you exactly at the same time that you speak. They have to process it. So you watch your rate, you watch your pausing. All of you know that as performing storytellers. But short stories are difficult stories. We all know that fables, for example, are very short. And we know that at the end of a fable, what do you hear? Things like, slow and steady wins the race because they're children and we need to know the parable. That's another increment in a practical story. There needs to be a parable, for lack of another word. There needs to be meaning. Now, here are some examples of what I mean when I'm talking about a practical story. And you have access to all of this too. I hope you find it helpful. First of all, what makes it really difficult is that these are situations where you use a practical story. These are situations that require maximum emotional and intellectual impact with a very strict time period. So essentially you're told, you've got 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds to make an impact. And here are some examples of situations where that occurs. In the interview process, advertising, public relations, as verbal support positioned in a speech like a toast or a roast, group discussion, even in simple conversations, case studies and the like. I have a few examples of these that I want to share with you, if I may. I've taught interviewing for a whole lot of years, and I've also trained recruiters at Exxon, Manpower Temporary Inc., Marriott Hotel, and the Houston Police Department. So I've had a lot of experience in terms of what makes a good interviewer, what makes a good interviewee. It's a communication process. But let's say, for example, you're a student and you walk into an interview and you are asked to talk about your co-curricular activities and what you learned from them. It's a legitimate question. It's a very general question. You could spend an awful lot of time answering that question. So when I ask students, what would you say? Many of them would say, well, I would list all of my co-curricular activities. Does that sound effective to you? First of all, it's on the resume. So why would you want to repeat anything that's on the resume? What you would say is something like, well, there are all kinds of activities in which I took part, but starting the blood bank in my senior year was probably the most important. I'll never forget, there was an accident outside of the school. You could just hear the most terrifying crash. And when we went out to see what happened, there was a young lady who needed blood desperately. And the nurse said, we don't have a blood bank, someone called 911, we need blood quickly. And then later, when she was taken care of, and thank God she was okay, I asked the nurse, I said, why don't we have a blood bank? And she talked about fundraising, talked about a number of other things that were very manageable. So I took it upon myself to start a committee on developing a blood bank. And now Memorial High School has one. There are things that I've accomplished in my life, but I know that this one, which deals with life and death, and that I initiated, is probably the most meaningful to me. How's that for a response? Not bad, right? Yeah, okay. So that's what I teach kids to do. Does it work? You better believe it works. Absolutely. And the other reason why this works is that I mentioned that I do consulting with recruiters. The reason why Exxon could not hire people for a long time is because of Valdez. Many of you remember Valdez in the early 80s. Nobody wanted to work for Exxon. They all thought that they were, dolphin and seal murderers. They didn't want to work for them. So once Exxon would explain to students why this would happen, they would ask them questions that would be very relevant about why they would want to work for this kind of a company. I was fascinated when Betsy Mosier this morning talked about Joel Ben Izzy and his technique of finding out what is the corporation about, how do you humanize it? Well, that's what we did with Exxon. So for example, we would never have a chemical engineer interview a student who was looking for a position as a chemical engineer, ever. Because all you're going to look at is someone who is going to take away your job, match you, and your comparison base is going to be with someone who does what you do for a living. So what I would train them to do is to understand the core requirements of Exxon that would be transferable to any position, whether it be an engineer, HR, accounting, management, you name it. And when we would do so, they would ask for a story, right? Stories like, tell me exactly why your professor said so many good words about you, right? Or questions like, everybody knows that leadership is important. Everybody knows that. And we know that good groups need to have good leaders. Tell me exactly what you would think would be the best leadership trait that you could offer in the position for which you seek. Questions like, what is your greatest weakness and your greatest strength? That's a typical question, isn't it? Recruiters believe that's the single worst question you can ask. What's a better question? Well, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, but what I'd like to know is, what is your greatest strength and weakness? What would your response be? Well, I can't compare myself to other people I have not yet met. I'm sure that other people who applied for this job are great candidates because it's a great position to have. I can only tell you about my own strengths and my own limitations and what I'm doing to maximize them that fits the needs of this company. Get the idea? So now I'm about to tell a story. Does this make any sense to you? A little bit, right? Okay. I'm going to ask Emily in a moment to play an advertisement, but let me give you some examples of the others first, and then we're going to play that 30-second ad before we come back and do some other things. When I do coaching, and I'm doing a session tomorrow on coaching and critiquing, I do a lot of coaching for parents because they want to incorporate a story in a toast or a roast, right? But they only have 2 minutes to give the toast, or 3 minutes at the most. You have to admit that's pretty challenging, right? How do you tell a story about your daughter on her wedding day when you only have 2 minutes? Do you list all the things that are wonderful about her? Or do you capture a story that conveys the essence of who she is, right? Now, theoretically, we know that second option is a better one. Consider this before I give you this example. Have any of you known people all of your life, but when you think about it, you don't know much about them? You ever experience that? What about people that you don't know very well, but you know a great deal about them? I would bet that in that second category, the reason why you know a great deal about them is because they've told you stories. It's because you have a little bit more disclosure. They've revealed more, as stories can do. Stories take listeners on a journey and then return them safely to the present. You learn more because the quality of that information is apparent, it's image-driven, and it's attention to getting. So, for example, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but here's what one father did when I coached him. He began his toast, and he said, every father wants to say something unique about his daughter. Loyal, honest, trusting, beautiful. All of them come to mind, right? And they all come to mind with Karen, too. But Karen, as some of you already know, has an incredible sense of kindness, an unrivaled kindness that I think really encases her soul more than anything else. A lot of you know our Beagle Betty, right? I don't know if you know how Betty joined our home, but 6 years ago, when Karen was 18, we were in terrible traffic. To say that there's terrible traffic in Houston is an understatement, right? People are yelling, they're screaming. These are angry people on steroids. And all of a sudden, Karen says to me, "Dad, pull over. Pull over." I did because it sounded really urgent. I pulled over on the feeder, and she very carefully opens the door and leaves. I said, "Where are you going?" She says, "Just wait, Dad, wait." She walks over and picks up a little beagle puppy. Now, the puppy was scared, but with her own style, ignoring all the people around her, she just prioritized patience and love with honking and yelling and swearing that surrounded her. That puppy came to her. No ID. We waited quite a long time to see if the owner would show up, and the owner didn't, and we adopted her. And she called her Betty. Now, somehow the compassion and empathy that Karen shows, the selflessness, make for ingredients for an incredibly kind person. That day, when Karen found Betty, she was the only one who saw that dog that day, right? Think about that. Now, others who would have seen it might not have been as mean, but Karen saw the dog. I don't know. Maybe her husband, as of 21 minutes ago, Bob, knew that about Karen's soul, because he too has a great soul. So, here's to Bob and Karen, and a lifetime of support, growth, laughter, and even tears, but most of all, kindness. Here's to you. Okay. Now that is a 2-minute and 15-second toast. What'd you think? What are your impressions of that toast? It's a small group. You don't have to worry about, showing your little yellow hands down there.
My first
Yeah.
thought, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead,
Bernadette, hi. What did you think?
It was wonderful and concise, but it seemed longer because it was so neatly packaged. It was so perfectly packaged. It seemed as if it were a proper full-length story, when in fact, as you said, it wasn't even three
Yeah.
minutes
Well,
long.
actually, that's a good insight because it's me paraphrasing it, and you know how storytellers are. So I'm, but it's true. I'm more concerned about, but when the father delivered it, first of all, he's never given a speech in his life, so he said, and he also said I'm a terrible storyteller. And I told him, yes, you have, and no, you're not. So after coaching him and asking him, tell me the most unique thing about your daughter, and he said, well, she's everything, but she is so kind. And he emphasized that. And I said, well, give me an example of her kindness. He talked about this. So he did not deliver it this thoroughly, but it was delivered very well. Perhaps
Well,
not
and,
as
and
long, but nevertheless, it was really good and people loved it, and he felt great about it. And most importantly, his daughter loved it. Yeah. These kind of stories are gifts, aren't they? They're gifts. People remember them. That's why we remember our stories, because they're gifts. So here we have an example of an interview response, right? We have an example of a toast. Also, we have situations where the kind of impact that we have to make has to be immediate. Since Bernie is here, I have to remind her and everybody else. I took her memoir class a few years ago at TSA, and frankly, I remember that for really a good reason, because a lot of the entries that we write, or I should say, examples of ways to write our entries, are really very quick memories. I mean, for example, if I could, Bernadette asked to us, think about a car in your past. The year, the model, the color, where is it parked? Go to the driver's side, what do you see? Go to the passenger side, where do you see? This is kind of a synthesis of it all. And I remember saying, well, when I go to the passenger side, I see crumbs on the floor, because my grandmother always had crackers in her purse, so she wouldn't starve on the half-mile drive down to my Aunt Ruthie's, her sister. She was a Holocaust survivor, right? Now, think about that. If I were to tell you that really just about a 30-second story, would you know a great deal about my grandmother, and would you know a great deal about me, relatively speaking? Probably. But I could sit here for 2 hours and tell you, the things we used to eat and talk about and how I felt about them, but they wouldn't not nearly be as in-depth or as rich as the tale that I just told you. So even in a memoir, at times, even if our entries aren't really short, quick memories with quick stories and anecdotes can give us an opportunity to generate memoirs that are richer and certainly more worth keeping. Emily, if you'd be so kind, would you play this clip for us? Let me just tell everybody what they're about to see. This is a 30-second advertisement. Now, a lot of my majors go into advertising, a lot of them. They're told to generate 30-second elevator talks. If they're dealing with branding, this is a great example for storytellers. Storytellers get jobs in branding because they have to be able to come up with a succinct, attentive, incredibly persuasive ad in a really short period of time. A 30-second ad is no less than $500,000 on TV, and on the radio you can get away with a little bit less. The point is, expensive stuff, right? This is a 30-second ad about a Johnson & Johnson sponsored hospice nurse. I'd like you to please watch this. Emily?
Hear it? See it? Oh, it's not talking yet. Sound. All right, hold on. Sorry.
It's all right. We can wait. Let me see. No, we need to do it on your side. Emily, what do you think? Can you do it? Because if not,
Oh,
we can
you
go
didn't
back to
see
it.
it? Did you see it?
I don't, but I don't need to. Everybody else can see it?
We can see
Great.
it,
And
but
hear
we
it?
can't hear.
Sound.
Yeah,
Let
I
me
could
try
see it.
one more time.
I think the share sound needs to be on, Emily.
Right.
Okay, let me find that. Shoot. Ah,
If you look down on the bottom, it says share.
let's share.
Uh
Oh,
huh.
stop moving around.
Yeah.
This
If you click
one.
on that and you look onto the right, it says share sound.
Share sound. There it is. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. And the sound is on. Okay. Let's other stuff out of the way. It always turns the video. Okay, here we go. Try it again. Let's turn it off.
With her, checking her heart rate, administering. I'm a hospice nurse. Berta Olson is my patient. I spend long hours with her, checking her heart rate, administering her medication, and just making her comfortable. One night, Berta told me about a tradition in Denmark. When a person dies, she said, someone must open the window so the soul can depart. I smiled and squeezed her hand. Not tonight, Berta. Not tonight.
To nurses everywhere, thank you from Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. What are your impressions of that ad? Nice, huh? Very.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I love it. It put me in tears because I thought it was just a great example of what hospice nurses do. I'm sure some, well, I have had many interactions with hospice nurses, and I think they're just some of the most spectacular creatures on earth because they don't only deal with, the patient's comfort. They are incredible listeners. They really are. I mean, they sense and they interpret and respond to sensory information. They beckon these kind of stories. So when my grandfather died and the hospice nurse was there, and he was not a very talkative man, but she would ask him, tell me about your greatest memory, or tell me about that watch that you gave your grandson, to me. Questions that would reveal so much about him. And the nurse would be just really the best interviewer that I've ever seen. Most people just can't do that. I think that this ad demonstrated that. What did you think about this 30-second ad? Did you see how it was a story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And that's why advertising is a really great, I'm talking practical here, again, practical, why I always suggest advertising as an important discipline for storytellers. I mean, I don't know if I should talk about this, but this won't surprise many people. For a lot of years, I was OCD, off the chart OCD. I am still, right? I'm so OCD that, I've got to say, CDO. But in any event, yeah, OCD that I was asked to describe what it is like to do that, to be that. And I had 2 minutes to tell the story. And again, I don't remember all of it, but I said something like, the moment I get up and I stand in the shower, I'm worried about getting clean enough. I know that it's going to take a while, so I get the soap going and I wrap it around my neck 14 times. Don't ask me why it's 14, but it's got to be 14. If it's 13, I have to start again until I know it was 14. Now, after that, well, I wash my arms and then my chest. I have a rule, I have a routine, I've got to follow it. And if I deviate from it, I start from the beginning, meaning I turn the water on and then I have to start. Then I wash my hair twice because having clean hair really means a great deal about me. Now, there's this feeling in your mind that some terrible fate is going to meet you if you don't perform these routine tasks. The pressure is constant, it's overwhelming. It's like a voice saying, don't stop. It's like a locomotive out of control. Is that descriptive for you? Because, that's what PR is all about, isn't it? Think about it. The difference between advertising and public relations is that with public relations, you are really pronouncing and accelerating the importance of a service. So, if you're telling a man, get your prostate exam every year, it's not necessarily go to this clinic, it's get a prostate exam every year. It's the importance. So in this case, I was talking about the critical nature of treating OCD, that it's paralyzing, it's very debilitating. And, there are all kinds of examples of very short stories. I remember the movie Indecent Proposal is one of like thousands, okay? And I remember Robert Redford was asked, well, why did you do this? Why did you give them $1 million to spend one night with his wife? I mean, what was that all about? He said, years ago I was on the subway and there was a girl. She was dressed like, she was gorgeous. She was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, but I was shy. When she looked at me, I looked away. And when I looked at her, she looked away. When it was time for me to get off the train, I did, but I looked back, and then she gave me the most beautiful smile I ever saw. I couldn't wait to get back to see her. I went back the same time, same station, same ride. I would get on, and I never saw her again, and I never wanted that to happen again. So he doesn't want to miss an opportunity. When I was, just occurred to me that, in my dating days, I remember I was sitting at a bar, and there was this just spectacular bartender. She was very smart and very beautiful, and I was the only one sitting at the bar that time. And she came up to me and she said, she asked, "Tell me your story," which is how I came up with the name of my show, So What's Your Story? And it was fabulous. And I just found myself providing a bunch of narratives. I remember saying to her, I walked into another bar because the bar reminded me of this, and there was a gentleman sitting there who asked me, you ever have any regrets? And I said, oh yeah, I've always got regrets. He said, I have a story about a regret. Do you mind if I share it with you? And he says, he used to live in an efficiency apartment before moving here to Houston. And I was just there temporarily. I was unpacking and I got a knock at the door, and there was a woman, old woman, who asked if I had any flour. I said, no, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't have any flour. And she walked away. About 15 minutes later, she came back, knocked on the door, and asked, do you have any sugar? I said, no, I don't have any sugar, ma'am, I'm sorry. I knocked at the door, so my dog thinks we're under attack. Yeah, no, we don't have any sugar. 15 minutes later, she comes back again and knocks on the door and asks, do you have any salt? I said, no, no, ma'am, I have no flour, no sugar, and I have no salt. I was afraid that I wasn't all that polite to her, and she left. About 20 minutes later, I had some errands to do, so I walked down the street to the small market, got a few things that I needed, and walked back. And when I got to the large home in which I was living, this large Victorian, where there were several apartments, I saw a maintenance man on the third floor putting a window back. And I asked him what he was doing. And he said, well, about 10 minutes ago, the woman who lived here threw herself out the window and killed herself. Yeah. And I did exactly what Bernadette is doing. Oh, are you kidding? He said, wow. And he looked at me, about to cry, and he says, you know, I'm a good person. I really am a good person, but all she wanted was a friend. And I just couldn't take a few minutes to figure that out. I don't blame myself for her jumping out the window, although I did for a while. But you know, I just wish that would all happen again so I could just say, ma'am, I don't have any flour, I don't have any sugar, but come on in. You know, I'm unpacking, and maybe I can find some coffee. We could talk a few minutes. Short story, wasn't it? Really short story. About 2 minutes, I would estimate. But you know, it really touched me. It really touched me. And you know, that's one of the stories that I remember telling the bartender and a lot of other people when I provide examples of short stories that really work. So we have my OCD story, we have Robert Redford, we've got the regret story, right? We've got so many examples. We have the hospice nurse. And what we know about all of these stories is one thing. They build emotional tension, they get our attention, they do offer some level of conflict. They're brought to closure. And they're brought to closure not necessarily because the story is at the end, but we're bringing it to closure by how it's communicated. So when that gentleman was telling me the story about regrets, he didn't say, let me go on and finish the story. He said, you know, all she wanted to do was for me to be a friend, and if it all happened again, I'd invite her in and just tell her I'm unpacking and let's talk for a while. You know, the way he delivered it, that was the end of what that narrative was about. We have a lot of control with these short stories, don't we? We know how to begin. We know how to end. We know how to condense it if it is on our experience base and we know we have X amount of time. I would suggest it's a great way to practice a story. I always talk about other ways of practicing a story, and I wanted to show you what some of them are because we're going to practice them in just a few minutes. You know, these are some prompts. Many of us have seen these prompts, right? You can see them. Endings, love does hurt. Can you see those? Yeah. Take a look at this list. Take a look at this list. I want you to pick one. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds, that's all. And I'm going to ask you to give us a powerful 10-second opening. You know, a few seconds opening. No more than 10 seconds. To get our attention on one of these topics. Just a 10-second opening. Okay. Whatever you do is going to be great. Just want to see how pumped up we can get if we're told we have a short period of time. We want to get people's attention. You probably know this by now, but you don't ever want to start a story with "my story is about." We know your story is about something. That's why you're about to tell us one. And you know, to say once upon a time might work in fairy tales, but it doesn't work in our personal lives. And it certainly doesn't end with "they lived happily ever after." So get our attention and let's see what you come up with. All right. Okay. Emily, have you got a opening for us for one of these?
Not yet. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Not yet. I'm still thinking.
Okay. All right. Bernie, have you got opening to one of these? Yeah.
Um, my mother-in-law absolutely loathed me. She loathed everything about me. She liked English people until she met me. There are all sorts of reasons why, mostly because she had wanted the first wife to come back. And so the older she got, the more demented she got. And the more demented she got, the more she forgot that she didn't like me. And so by the time full dementia had set in, she totally uh, it had gone from her mind that she didn't like me. She loved me. And I was able to forgive her everything she had ever done because the last couple of years were just wonderful. She beamed with excitement the moment she saw me because she had no memory whatever of whatever reason it was that she had not liked me
I
in
love
the
it.
beginning.
Yeah.
And I felt great forgiveness for her and love too, because I realized she must have had her reasons, but
Right.
they were gone now.
Love it. I love it. And that's really a complete story. And I love it because I can think of a lot of possible openings, as I'm sure any of us can, that would really make this a remarkable narrative. For example, I like dementia. And I'm going to tell you why. Because my mother-in-law with dementia all of a sudden started to like me. That's just an example of what I mean, right?
I hear you.
Yeah, just an example. Tweed, have you got one?
Unmute.
You're on
Here
mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
I am.
Okay.
Sitting here thinking, all right, we just start
Yeah.
here.
Real short one.
I had a great loss 9 years ago when my wife passed away, and I didn't realize how much of a remarkable person she really was until afterwards. Um, the conversations that we had in the last few months of her life were absolutely phenomenal, and they're the reason I am who I am today. Uh, she was Texan to the bone and a very strong woman, but at the same time, she was very warm and opening. And again, I am who I am because of her.
Mhm.
So it's
Okay.
good what I've got.
Great. Yeah, now that's great. Now remember, we don't want to go more than 10 seconds with an opening. And it's hard, isn't it? It's really hard because you have to make selections. So, I am because of my wife. She was Texas to the bone, and that includes warmth and strength. That's not the best opening, but that condenses some of the things that you wanted to say, right?
Yes.
Let's jump around because we have another exercise so that for those of you who don't get to this one, yeah, we'll do the next one. Chester,
Fran
how you
has
doing?
Oh, Fran has her hand up.
Hello, Hank. How you doing?
Great, thank you.
I wasn't sure what to do. I think I had just cost my customer a major account, all because I was following his rules, and he was coming back from lunch, and I had to explain what happened. That's the opening.
Okay, nice. I like it. I see no problem with that. It's not a matter of a good one or a bad one. It's a matter of do you have our attention? And for me, you do. Emily, did you say you had one?
Fran and Dennis have their hands up. And
Fran, I'm
Steve.
sorry.
Okay, just as an opening,
Yeah.
you never know when storytelling skills are going to be helpful. Have you ever been attacked by a rabid dog?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. Because I already want to know what the hell do they have to do with each other? And that's a great opening. That is a great opening. Let's do one more. Alan?
Dennis has his hand, and Stefan and Deborah.
Oh, Debbie? Okay.
I'm
Yeah. Alan and then Debbie.
okay. Once upon in Los Angeles, I had occasion to run into Natalie Wood, who was just so stunningly, preposterously beautiful. You just couldn't believe it. And as time has gone by, I've realized you can be too beautiful.
Okay, good. I like it. I want to know about the story. Recommendation, I'd even shorten it. I'd say Natalie Wood is beautiful, but I saw her and she's beyond beautiful, too beautiful. Let me explain, or something like that. Okay?
You've got two hands up, Dennis and Debbie.
Debbie, and then Dennis, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
When my
Deb?
daughter, oh, sorry. When my daughter was born, she spoke music with the rhythm of her body, and you wouldn't believe how excited she came and announced everything she did on every day.
Very good. Good, good, good. Good. Dennis, you had your hand up?
Yes, I'll do another. Try to do another short dog story. So, so the day our son was born, he had surgeries. It was a very long day. When I got home, I was sitting out in the gazebo, reflecting upon my first day of fatherhood, which had been pretty lousy so far. Our dog was out there, and our dog was barking, and I was looking at this large black object that it was barking at. And in my mind, I was thinking, please, God, don't let that be a skunk. I saw a white stripe running down its back. And then guess what? The dog was going, ah!
Yeah, and what was it? Was it a skunk?
It was a skunk, and it had been sprayed. And I ran over and to drag the dog away, saying, please, skunk, don't spray me, as I'm pulling the dog, which was riding and playing away from the skunk.
Okay, so your dog kind of warned you, right? Inadvertently,
like
Yeah, dogs are great about that. They protect you, right?
Yes.
Here's a whole new meaning to your dogs protecting us from a smell. Because when that dog barked out there, I knew. When I saw something black, it was a skunk. And when I heard that howl, I knew I was right. Or, whatever. Okay. Very good. Okay, you guys get the idea, right? That was just an idea of how to start a short story as effectively as possible. Now, a little exercise that I like using, and I use this with students all the time, is when you think about a story, and again, it isn't so much that it's debatable if there's no time limit to a story, but again, the essence of this workshop is to think about how to make a story practical because of the context. Teaching, even, people don't even realize that even a date will work with a story. Like, if you've ever been on a date, and you have, it's sometimes like a job interview. What the hell is this, right? But sometimes when you ask questions like, tell me what your favorite children's story is, right? That's the kind of question I used to ask. And you get a story and you learn something, and if the person has never read a book, you'll learn a lot. So it's a no-lose situation, right? So in this case, I had to blank the moment I realized the cake had different names on it. What did you do? What was the action? I knew tonight would be awful as soon as I saw what? As soon as the interview blank, I knew I was going to get the job. What would be a good thing to fill in there? As soon as the interview blank, I knew I was not going to get the job. Can you think of anything? As soon as the interview looked at his watch, right? I would say as soon as the interview looked at his watch, I knew I wasn't getting the job, or something like that. I was indescribably embarrassed when I noticed
my shoes didn't match.
Right, my shoes don't match. Yeah. But you could do better than that. Shoes don't match, that's embarrassing. Anything else? That my jeans just sat a little too low. Or, I don't know, whatever. Right? Right. But these are ways of filling in your focal point. Right? Now, what I'd like you to do is to craft a 2-minute story, and you're going to be taking part even if we don't get to you. All right, trust me on this. But I'd like you to try to think about a 1 to 2 minute story on the following. You're in a room and you are with everybody that you met in your life. Who would you look for first? Who would you look for first? Now, I want to apologize in advance because everybody will not have an opportunity to tell their story, but I'd like to do 2 or 3 of them, please. But this is a good exercise for all of us as sort of a summary technique of what this workshop is designed to do, right? So, thank you. Thank you, Emily, for all your help. What do you think? You have enough time to prep? Yeah? All right. Now, first of all, you don't have to tell your entire story. You don't have to take the 2 minutes. As a matter of fact, we might even shorten it a little bit so that we can get through a few more people. But while you're thinking about your story, think about it, I want to give you an example of the next exercise that I love using in order to, again, create focus and practicality. All right. You know, children, the old notion that children should be seen and not heard, sometimes we take that a little bit too far. Kids sometimes ask great questions, they really do. And for some reason, as parents, as adults, we have some trepidation in answering them because we think that somehow they're really challenging. Take Bobby, little 5-year-old. He walked up to his mother and asked, Mommy, how old are you? And Mommy said, Bobby, mommies don't like to respond to those kind of questions. Okay, but how much do you weigh? Well, mommies don't like to answer those kind of questions either. All right, frustrated. Mommy, then how come you and Daddy got a divorce? Well, now that's a very good question, Mommy concedes, but you're much too young to understand. One day I'll tell you. Well, Bobby may be 5, but he knows he's asking some legitimate questions. He's stuck, so he goes to his best friend, Tommy, and asks his best friend, Tommy, another 5-year-old, Tommy, do you know how to get information from your mom? Oh, yeah, Tommy says. I have an absolute way. My daddy's a police officer, and he knows that the best way to get information about anyone is by looking at their driver's license. Then you'll know everything. Well, Bobby believes him, and he wakes up the next morning early, gets down, and takes a look at Mommy's driver's license and memorizes it cold. Walks up to Mom and says, Mommy, I know how old you are. Well, I told you that I wasn't going to tell you. Well, you're 33. Well, that's a pretty good guess. And I know how much you weigh. Well, I told you that I wasn't going to answer that, Bobby. Can I guess, though? Because I think you weigh 118 lbs's. Well, that's pretty good. And I really know why you and Daddy got a divorce. Well, I told you that I wasn't going to answer that despite it being a good question. You don't ever have to answer it again. I know. It's because you got an F in sex. So, there we go. There is the reason why you better talk to your kids. Some of you, you know. It's funnier than that. Okay, you've probably heard that before. All right, so you get the idea. All I am doing is taking a joke, right, and I'm making it into a story. The reason I do that is because, again, it's another example of what does your joke mean, i.e. your story mean? Can you make it into a story with a beginning and an end in order to make it a complete message, e.g. a complete story? So it's another example, right? So let's hear some of yours, if we could, right? Stephen, do you have one? Stephen? You don't have one. No problem. Patrick, do you have one? Wanted to get to different folks. Have you got one, Patrick?
Sure. So I'm in the room, and the person that I see there that I most want to meet again, I guess, is Tom Lynch. Tom was a twin. He had a twin brother, and both of them were Catholic priests. Tom taught English at Father Ryan High School, where I went, and he was the sort of the touchstone of all the priests that taught our high school class. He was interesting, he was kind, he was a little bawdy as a priest. And at our graduation, we had a party at the lake. Tom was killed. And all the reunions, we missed. That's the story.
Yeah. That's a good story, Patrick. It's a really good story. Very touching, very moving. And remember, we were talking a little earlier about the fact that with a short story in particular, there has to be some kind of emotional impact, right? You have to make an impression at least as soon as possible. Remember, storytellers take people on journeys and then they return them safely to the present. No matter how emotional it is. When I tell stories about being raised by Holocaust survivors, they're always depressing. And I don't want people to walk around depressed the rest of their life, so I have to do something and bring them back to the present, making them feel a little differently, making them feel safer. And that's kind of what you did here. That's a beautiful story. Who else has one? Tweed, have you got something to share with us? You're on mute. See your mic on the bottom when red? You want to click on that where it says audio.
Here we go. I think. Yeah, there we go. As I said before, high-tech world, low-tech guy. Now, let me see it. Yeah. How did she know? How on earth did she know? I'm talking about my mom. Because I was home on leave. And I went to a friend's house. And on the way back from the house, I realized I'm almost out of gas. Well, just so happens I'm sitting there at the light. And there's a gas station right across the intersection. I had never been to that gas station, of course. But it was on the way. So I pull in there. And that's back in the days when the attendant used to come out and fill your car and clean your windows and all that. And while we were there, the phone rings in the office. So the attendant goes in and he answers the phone. He comes out and he says, "What do you guys need, Tweed?" "Well, yeah, me." He said, "You got a phone call." "What? I've never been here in my life." So I go in there and it's my mother. And she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're on the way to the house and mess around over there." And she says, "Well, okay, do me a favor. On the way home, go to the IGA, pick me up a quart of milk and a loaf of bread." So I bring it home and all that. And then later on, I ask her, she will not tell me how she knows that I was going to be in that gas station that I'd never been to before. And I didn't know I was going to be there then. My mom passed away That is one of the things she took with her. I never learned. So if I got to spend 10 minutes with my mother on that bench, that's the question I'm going to ask her. How did you know?
All right. Very good. Very, very good. I love it. A lot of humor there, some emotional shifts. Very good. I want to apologize. I know Deb and some other people wanted to continue with stories, and I do apologize. We just have a few minutes left. But again, doing what you just did is a great way of implementing some of the principles that we talked about so far. So you didn't waste your time. It gives you something to work on, and it gives you something to craft, mold, if you will, to practice some of these techniques. What short stories teach us is really quite important. It teaches us to be very clear rather than abstract. Short stories, practical stories, allow us to find good sense of meaning of words. We get rid of redundant or meaningless words. We know that amazingly astonishing is not relevant, It's just astonishing. We learn how to use words better. We get rid of our vocal fillers, We rely more on our delivery tools. We sometimes use gestures and postures to compensate for images that we might ordinarily not be able to communicate. And coherence is really important, is it? Now, we all know what coherence is. We know that coherence is when a story makes sense. Resonating is when it rings true, but coherence is when it makes sense. And we know that we can create a coherent story, as all of your words were today, by the way, whether you just did the opening with that exercise or whether you conducted yourself as a fuller-fledged storyteller, although there is no such word. But here's another way of creating coherent stories, and that's by segues. You can create a segue to anything if you know the topic, right? I mean, if I said, prostate exam, oil change, that has nothing to do with each other. But if I'm giving a speech and I say, it's amazing how many men know when to get an oil change, but they forget the importance of getting a prostate exam every year. Now, there's a segue that makes some good sense, right? Somewhat. So what segues do is that they really do create great coherence, and they create development of ideas and how they relate to each other, and the obvious. But let me tell you kind of a fun way of doing this. You ever do a browsing history and look back and say, what the hell did I look up? How do all of these connect? Have you ever done that? No? Well, they're kind of weird, because when I get online and I'm looking things up, I look at my browsing history. And when I'm looking at tasting notes, this is the most recent: Old Crow, Sour Mash, U.S. Grant, Lincoln's Inquisition, Battle Booze, Prohibition in the South, Temperance Movement, Supper Club, Password Checkup, and American Express. What do all of them have in common? Well, everything. I was talking to a friend about whiskey. He's a whiskey connoisseur, if you will. And I asked him, what is a tasting note? And why do you use your nose rather than your tongue to taste in whiskey, at least at first? And he explained it to me, and he said, it was first done with Old Crow. Old Crow was one of the first American bourbons ever made, and it was used to make sour mash, which was the first mixed bourbon drink that really went to tasting contests, that people could see that bourbon and other ingredients were wonderful together. And I looked that up, and I found that Old Crow was Ulysses S. Grant's favorite bourbon. And as a matter of fact, so much so that Lincoln would ask other generals, you guys use bourbon too? Because Ulysses is really good. I'm wondering if that's the secret behind your success, or some of you no success. Because if you don't have any success and you don't drink any bourbon, that's what I'm getting you for Christmas, in a humorous way. Then the battle booze, and when I go on and on with battle booze and Prohibition in the South, the temperance movement. I talk about the importance of bars and bourbon and why bartenders love people who drink bourbon as opposed to vodka, because people who drink bourbon and scotch know what they're talking about, and they're also smarter people. I talk about the First Supper Club, speakeasies, and what that means. And then that gets me back to my Google Manager, because somehow I had to redo what I was doing at that time to continue on, because technology just throws you for a loop. I had to do a password checkup, and that took me to American Express, and I figured as long as I was there, I might as well check my account. Okay, now, you get the idea, right? The idea is that each one of those seemingly unrelated topics all connected with each other. When we create stories and ideas, what is obvious to one person is not obvious to another. Our ability to connect ideas unrelated to others but totally related to us is a way that we create coherence. So in this workshop, and I hope you enjoyed it, I hope it made some sense, we're talking about how to create a story spark when you need to tell a short story. One that is practical, which means one that you need to tell while you're teaching in the context of a toast or a roast, as an advertisement or PR message, as a response to an interview question, or even as a way to begin conversation and continue it so that it's enjoyable and we start realizing what we've always known, and that is that storytelling rules because our life is our story and our story is our life. If we can draw from that, then whether we're telling a really long story like DC did, or whether we're telling a really short story like we oftentimes must, we can do it well because we've got some ideas, some suggestions, and hopefully a little bit of practice, enough to make sure that it makes sense to you. Are there any questions? Did this make sense to you? Yes, hopefully. I hope it did. Yes. And this is available to you, by the way, in the file folder. If you can't find it or there is anything else you need, well, let me know and I'll be happy to get it to you. In the meantime, I'm around if you want to ask questions. Most of you know my email and stuff, and all of my contact information is on the handout, so please feel free to reach out. I hope you have a great rest of the conference, and it was great having you here. Thank you.
Well, be sure and thank you as well, really.
Thank you very, very much.
So I'm going to end this one. I'm going to end it so we can start the next one.
Yes, we have a little bit of a break before we start the next one. These are tough for obvious reasons. You have an hour, and I really thought that I could do this comfortably in an hour, and I apologize that we didn't get to more of your stories, obviously. So that's why I wanted to emphasize that when you are actually doing an exercise or crafting a story, you really are practicing it as well, this evidence. So short stories are really critical. Think of them as practical, which will increase a degree of urgency. I've got to give a toast. I only have a 2-minute toast. I got to tell a story. I mean, what else am I going to do, right? Stories rule, stories work. But I can't talk about all of the things about my daughter, but I can talk about the one unique thing that stands out, right? It's about focus. It's about depth rather than breadth of information. It's about a lot about a little rather than a little about a lot. All sorts of ways of thinking about it. But you have any questions or comments? I'm here unless you need to take time and get to your next workshop or a break. But if you have any questions, I'm certainly open.
I'm not sure if I should click the end button or leave it open to start the next one.
Well, we'll take another question. Well, yeah, I think we probably should end it in a minute or two.
I think that you can't do both at the same time. Sorry.
All right. Well, just to be safe, then let's end
I'm pretty
it.
sure that you have to end one
Yes, you're right. You're right. I'm getting a note here saying end. So I think, Bernie, you're probably right. It says, Hank, end. I think I understand what that means. Okay. Have a rest of the
Thank you,
conference.
Hank.
That's great. Thank you very much.